put on a different background, now is a good time to do so. Okay, so just a reminder again, in terms of the flow of the evening, we will have introductions, then we will have a brief introduction from our youth communities, then we will have an official opening from Dania from the Ukrainian Canadian Students Union, a brief opening from the Honorable Blair, and then our recording ends and we'll have a facilitated Q&A. So this is actually the sign we had for recording begins, but we'll cut this out, it's fine, we're going live. All right, here we go. So thank you everyone for taking this time to join us for this really important conversation about what is happening in Ukraine. Especially thank you to everyone who's registered as youth, who identifies as youth. This is really our future on the line. The decisions and outcomes of today will impact us. We're really grateful for the Honorable Bill Blair for joining us today and making time to engage directly with youth, and just really grateful to have been working on this in partnership with our Ukrainian students. Honestly, you inspire us and we are with you every step of the way. We'd like to start by acknowledging that we are gathering from different parts of Canada, but I myself acknowledge the land I'm meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and it's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. This land is governed by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum, the Toronto Purchase, Treaty Number 13, and the Williams Treaties. These agreements are not just about geography or ownership, but they're about relationships with the land and with each other, and about shared resources and responsibilities. And it's important to note that as one of the calls to action from Canada's record-breaking Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, action item 66 specifically calls out the Canadian government to establish multi-year funding for community-based youth organizations to deliver programs on reconciliation and establish a national network to share information and best practices. And so while this event is catered to youth, we wanted to specifically call on this item and to say that as a collective, we think this is important and we continue to monitor how our Canadian government is honoring and responding to this call. So we're here because unfortunately history has been repeating itself. And when we reflect on what has been happening, what has happened to our grandparents, it seems as though history is here again. And actually a lot of us are wearing symbols that reflect on the actions that our grandparents have taken. I'm actually wearing a pin that is also reflected in this diagram that was a picture that was taken 31 years ago in front of City Hall, which is a memory of how our Baltic communities put out a distress signal due to the illegal annexation of our countries through the USSR. And this weekend and in the weeks to follow, many of us have stood and will continue to stand with our Ukrainian community members. But we're here to create an opportunity for youth to ask questions and to understand what is happening. We're not, no one is being forced to ask questions. No question is silly or too simple or unjustified. And we really just want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable engaging and being a part of what is happening. Without further ado, we wanted to just create an opportunity for each of our youth communities that have been a part of organizing this conversation to say a few words. So I'm going to pass it over to Lena Simonis, the current president of the Canadian Lithuanian Youth Association.
So hi everyone, I hope you can all hear me. My name is Lena Simonis, or Lena Simonita in Lithuanian, and I am currently serving as the president of the Canadian Lithuanian Youth Association, or Kanados Lietuvių Jaunimo Sąjunga in Lithuanian. Just a bit of context, KLJS, or the abbreviation is KLJS, is what we use. So just for a bit of context, KLJS was established in 1975 and represents Canadian Lithuanian youth ages 16 to 35. Its main purpose was, and still is, to unite youth across Canada by way of organizing events and encouraging youth to uphold Lithuanian culture and traditions. This was crucial at the time as Lithuania was under the constant threat of Soviet aggression. Now, some 30 years later, the people of Ukraine are facing this very same threat. The time has come for us, as Lithuanians and all countries scarred by Soviet oppression, to return the favor. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Leva Zemite, President of the Latvian National Youth Association of Canada. Ačiū, dėkoju.
Thank you so much, Lina. It's nice to see everyone here tonight. My name is Leva Zemite, and I'm the president of the Latvian National Youth Association of Canada, as well as a board member of the Latvian National Federation of Canada. It is so important for us to all be here tonight, and I just want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Minister Bill Blair, to every speaker here tonight, to all of the organizations who came together to organize this event, because I think I, along with many people here, have been feeling very overwhelmed and I don't want to say panicked, but it's been a very, very difficult last few weeks and last month. And as youth, it's hard to picture where we fit into this grand scheme of, international affairs, war. But our organizations are here to really provide that platform for us to be educated, to share important resources, to ask our questions like we're going to be doing tonight. And just to echo what Lina said, our countries have also experienced aggression at the hands of Russia. And I think we all ask ourselves, if that were to happen to the Baltic countries today, who would stand with us? And that's why we are standing with Ukraine, because we don't know what it's like right now, but we feel along with you, and we are committed to doing everything that we possibly can to stand with Ukrainians every day. And just echoing what's already been said, this is one event tonight, but this doesn't end tonight. And we will continue to share resources. We will continue to have these conversations and do absolutely everything in our power to support the people of Ukraine. And with that, I would like to introduce a representative from the Ukrainian Students Club at U of T, Marta Peranhitis. Thank you so much to the Ukrainian Students Club for hosting this with us. And please, Marta.
Thank you, Leva. So I am a first-year rep at the Ukrainian Students Club at U of T, or Український студентський клуб при Університеті Торонто. We are really, really grateful that the organizers from all different kinds of organizations, Baltic Youth, have come together to help us, because really now in the past 5 days, especially worldwide, it's been an entire 180 from every previous Ukrainian problem that we have run into with Russian aggression. As a lot of us like to say, it's not 1930 anymore, everyone is watching. It's not 2014 anymore, everyone knows what's going on. So thank you guys, this is really important for this to be happening and for everybody here to be asking questions and to learn more in a judgment-free environment. And we are really happy to have a representative from the Ukrainian community, the president of SUSK, Danya Pankiev. I think she'd like to say a few words. Thank you, Danya, for being here.
Thank you, Marta. And thank you very much, Lina and Leva, for those very kind words. It means a lot to us Ukrainians that you are standing with us and that you're attending our rallies. I've seen your representative speak at some of them in Toronto. And it's, like you said, it's very much appreciated and more important than ever at this time. So thank you, Marta, for the introduction. My name is Danya Pankiev, and I am the president of the Ukrainian Canadian Students Union, or Союз Українського студентства Канади. And I'm also a board member of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. SUSK is the coordinating body of Ukrainian Canadian students at post-secondary institutions across Canada. And it was established in 1953 and is the largest Ukrainian student organization here in the diaspora. And our mission and vision is to uphold and promote Ukrainian language, Ukrainian culture and studies, and to raise awareness to all of these. And we work as a coordinating body to assist our associate member organizations, which we call Ukrainian Student Organizations, and University of Toronto is one of them, who has incredibly put this event together in partnership with the Lithuanian community. And we work to assist them and coordinate them and bring together all of our Ukrainian student organizations across the nation. And each year we do host a Congress where we do invite members of Canada and the global community to come and speak on issues that are relevant to us as Ukrainians and Ukrainian youth. And we meet in a different city each year across the country. This year we will be meeting in Edmonton, and I'd like to invite each of you here to come and attend. It would be incredible to meet in person after such a wonderful organization and event you put together here. Just to give a little bit of background on what's happening in Ukraine, Ukraine's freedom and democracy has been challenged by the Russian regime for centuries. However, we have seen how our nation has always shown its strength and has prevailed. In July of 2021, Putin wrote an essay that was titled "On the Historical Unity of Russians and Ukrainians." And that really showed the world that he, in his mind, believes that Ukrainians and Russians are the same people. And this has shown us a reason as why he has invaded Ukraine these last 5 days and started bombing our nation. The Ukrainian Canadian Students Union has been working tirelessly and endlessly in speaking with the Canadian government and raising this awareness on this issue. We met with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Wednesday, February 23rd, 1 hour before the bombings began in Kyiv. And at this meeting, we spoke to him about the importance of Operation Unifier, which Lithuanians are a part of, where Canadians, Lithuanians, and other Swedish, other groups are working to train Ukrainian soldiers in Ukraine. We also spoke about the war on disinformation and misinformation that is ongoing in Russia and different areas of the world. We spoke about world food security and the impact that this will have if Ukraine continues to be further invaded and if the war persists, and the importance of this for many countries across the world. We also spoke on the importance of Canada's plan on supporting Ukrainian refugees. We then met today, a few hours ago. I had a meeting with Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP party, and he really wanted to hear personal stories. And he was looking to the Ukrainian community to hear what our families and friends are going through right now in Ukraine. And he then spoke to us on humanitarian aid and where do we need more help with humanitarian aid. And I was attending this meeting on behalf of students to push the angle of how students in Canada and in Ukraine need humanitarian aid. Our 2 points and asks for the Canadian government and ask for Jagmeet Singh to really enforce in Parliament is to emphasize the importance of support in academic institutions currently for Ukrainian, Canadian, and Eastern European students. There are many obstacles and challenges that our students and Eastern European students are facing right now with trying to contact their families, trying to unite and stay together. And they are receiving some support from some schools, but other institutions are not, they're not accommodating students at this time. And the other ask is that the Canadian government consider how Ukrainian students from Ukraine will be accommodated when they come to Canada as refugees. So we're asking that the studies that they have put forward at universities and colleges in Ukraine can be transferred to Canadian post-secondary institutes so that their money isn't wasted, so that their education that they've received in Ukraine is valid here in Canada. These are the 2 things we have recently been working on. We really appreciate all of your support. We've been attending the rallies, we've been speaking at those, and we're going to continue to do so. In terms of your involvement, I wanted to touch on the importance of how you can get involved with helping Ukraine. And a big one here is to write to your member of parliament. We have letters drafted on the SUSC website at susc.ca and on the Ukrainian Canadian Congress website at ucc.ca. And I can include all of that information in the chat afterwards. We also ask that if you are able to spread the word about the Ukraine humanitarian appeal. This is a humanitarian appeal that is raising money for Ukraine. All of the funds are spent on helping displaced persons and refugees, providing food and shelter and hygiene products. Another really important and key factor here is to be aware of disinformation that you may come across on social media and to report it if you do come across it on any form of social media. We've already seen that you have been attending rallies. That is one of our points, and I'm very grateful to see you, and it's so heartwarming to see your support at these events. Another thing is to be aware of what news sources you're following, that they're not tied to Russia. And then we've drafted letters that you can also send to your deans, to your faculties at your post-secondary institutions, asking for support and accommodations at this time, if you need it, if you know of anyone who needs it at this time, and we're more than happy to provide those resources for you. I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and thank you again for inviting me to speak today.
Thank you, Danya, for taking time. That was incredibly useful, and we also have the opportunity to actually follow up by email. So we will taking all those resources and we'll collect them. And we actually had over 100 people register. So some folks are joining earlier and later. So we will definitely get the word out. Thank you so much for your time.
It's incredible. Thank you very much.
So we are now going to shift with another opening remark from our honorable guest, the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, Bill Blair. It's worth noting that Bill Blair actually held the position as Toronto's Chief of Police formerly, and in November 19, Bill was appointed as Canada's Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness. And as of October 21, Bill serves as the President of the Queen's Privy Council, as well as the Minister of Emergency Preparedness. Bill, we're super grateful that you are here with us this evening and want to pass the floor over to you.
Skyler, first of all, thank you for the very kind introduction, and I'm absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to join you here this evening. I think the voice of youth in this country are so important, and as does my Prime Minister. If I may just explain a little bit of perhaps why I was asked to be here. First of all, my Chief of Staff, Zita Astravas, is a part of the Lithuanian community, speaks to me often about it, and really felt it was really important that we make ourselves available and talk about the very important issues facing the Canadian community, but frankly all Canadians right now as a result of the situation in Ukraine. And for me, it was also frankly a bit of an opportunity. And as Skyler mentioned, I was for many years the Chief of Police in Toronto, but I also had the opportunity about 20 years ago when Lithuania was attempting to join NATO and then eventually the EU. The Canadian government sent me to Lithuania 3 different times. I spent several months there. Working with the Lithuanian government to reform the criminal justice system. I trained their police services quite extensively. I worked in Vilnius and Klaipėda, Kaunas, Šiauliai, Panevėžys, even put on a conference at Trakai, a beautiful site in Lithuania. And I share that with you mostly to tell you that I learned a great deal in that experience about how important that first of all, the homelands are to Canadians. And how much they care about their history, their culture, their language, and I got to know through that experience the Lithuanian community, the Latvian community, and the Ukrainian community much more intimately in Toronto. But also I also got to witness firsthand the enormous impact of the Soviet occupation and oppression of those nations, and their quest for freedom and sovereignty. And so that's one of the reasons, I think that I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to come here. As was also mentioned, I'm a minister of the Trudeau cabinet, and Prime Minister Trudeau actually is very seized with this issue, as I'm sure you're all aware. He has a very, very close personal friendship with President Zelensky, and of course our relationship with Ukraine and with Ukrainian Canadians is very important. I'm sure you're all aware, my very good friend, Chrystia Freeland, is our Deputy Prime Minister and a member of our cabinet. And at the very outset of what we recognized was a growing Soviet or Russian threat against Ukraine, the Prime Minister formed two very important groups within our cabinet. One is Incident Response Group that he chairs, and we meet virtually daily to talk about all of the measures of military, financial, diplomatic, issues of intelligence, issues of support, humanitarian aid. We speak about immigration and refugees, and I'm happy to talk about any of those things that people may wish to speak of tonight. And the Prime Minister also asked that I chair a special committee of cabinet members that deals just exclusively with issues arising from Ukraine. And we meet also on a daily basis. Our government is very much seized with these issues. I will be happy to respond to questions people may have, but since the outset, we have been working very hard, first of all, to ensure that we provide appropriate supports to Ukraine, and those supports have taken the form of financial assistance. We've since 2014, we've been involved in Project Unifier. We also have NATO deployments in Latvia, as I'm sure many of you are aware. But we've been there trying to be appropriately in support. Our foreign minister, Minister Jolie, has been traveling around Eastern Europe. She's currently in Geneva, heading to Poland, has been to Ukraine to meet with her counterparts. Minister Anand, our defense minister, has also been in Ukraine, making sure that we hear from them directly what type of supports they need, both military and financial and diplomatic, and all of the measures that we are prepared to take. I'm sure you've seen a number of almost daily announcements. There's been an escalation, not just in our response, but we've been working, our ministers have been working a lot behind the scenes over the past several weeks to try to mobilize the entire global community in response, in support of Ukraine and Ukrainian interests. And I think we've seen some remarkable movement over the tragedy of the last 5 days. We all witness and acknowledge the terrible tragedy that is taking place in Ukraine, and with an incredibly courageous response from their citizens, but also we're seeing the tragedy of innocent lives lost. I can only imagine how traumatic that is for the country, but also for those who love the country and love the people. And so I just want to take the opportunity to assure you all, we stand with Ukraine, and we will always stand with Ukraine, and we are prepared to do any measure that helps that country in its time of greatest need. And as Chrystia Freeland said today in the House of Commons, there's nothing off the table, and we are prepared to continue to escalate our response. I'm going to stop there, and I look very much forward to a conversation tonight, to answer any questions you may have, and also to hear your comments and your concerns. And I will undertake to you all to take what I hear tonight back to my cabinet colleagues and back to the Prime Minister, because we are very interested in what the Ukrainian Canadians, but also other communities which we know are highly, very anxious and concerned about what they're seeing there, not only for Ukraine, but for their own homelands. And we want to make sure that your voices are heard, and we want to assure you that we stand with you as well. So I'll turn that back over to you now, if I may.
Thank you so much, Minister Bill Blair. That was really, really helpful context, and really appreciated hearing your connection points to the Baltics. That's actually quite remarkable to hear that. And we did have the intention of closing the recording before the Q&A, but I did actually want to give Andres Kasekamp an opportunity just to say a few words. Andres is absolutely a professor, but also a community advocate, has been relentlessly on Canadian news outlets, just really communicating really important items as it relates to what's happening in Ukraine, as well as Andres has actually published a book in English about the history of the Baltic states. So Andres, just wanted to give you an opportunity on the record to say a few words before we transition.
All right, thank you, Skyja. Thank you, Minister. Let me say, first of all, that I'm the token Estonian here, because we have the Ukrainian organizers and the Latvians and Lithuanians. It's not that Estonians aren't interested and passionate about what is going on. The thing is that the Estonian Canadian community simply doesn't have an official youth organization. There are very active people, but they just don't have that type of association simply. However, of course, you'll have noted that Canadian Estonians are the only ones who've put together an endowed chair at a university in Toronto, which is the chair that I hold, the chair that I'm sitting in at the moment, because the chair is simply me. There's no one else in this department, so to say. So I'm a professor of history in the history department and also at the Monk School of Global Affairs, and I teach modern Baltic history to anyone who is interested at U of T. So I try to cover, I could focus, of course, only on Estonia, but I see it as my mission to cover the Baltic region in the widest sense, because there is no one else doing that at the University of Toronto. And let me give an example of how passionately Canadian Estonians also feel about the issue of Ukraine. Just before our meeting today, I got a message from one of my dearest old friends who's a Canadian Estonian from Newmarket, who relocated to Estonia a dozen years ago. And he just wrote me that he's preparing to receive a family of refugees from Ukraine into his home later this week. And Estonians had a rally in the capital city of Tallinn on Saturday, where there were 30,000 people, which is supposedly the same number we had at Toronto City Hall. But remember, the whole population of Estonia is slightly over 1 million. So percentually, there was quite a substantial show of support for Ukraine amongst Estonians. And of course, like Latvians and Lithuanians, Estonia began to transfer lethal weapons to Ukraine before the conflict started, way ahead of Canada, of course, and way ahead of the other NATO allies. And this was a much riskier move and got some criticism about a month ago from opposition parties, because the javelins and the other sort of resources that we have are very limited. We're sort of small and not very wealthy countries, and we have to defend ourselves as well. We're on the front line with Russia as well. So there were those who thought that perhaps it wasn't the wisest move to share our very scarce resources with Ukraine, not knowing what is to come. And in retrospect, of course, that was a very foresightful and the correct thing to do. I wish, and when we come to our discussion and Q&A with the minister, and I wish Canada would have also been a bit quicker off the mark in the terms of lethal aid. It took a while, I understand, to convince many in the cabinet that this was a good idea. But of course, it brings me back to the old Roman maxim: if you want peace, prepare for war. And as we all know, the behavior of Putin has been that he respects strength. And it's Lenin's old adage that when you face your adversary, the enemy, you stick them with the bayonet, and if you encounter only mush, then you keep pushing until you run into steel, something that will resist. And now, of course, Putin has discovered that the Ukrainians are not at all a pushover. To me, I've been teaching this semester at U of T for the first time a course on the history of Europe in the 20th century. Last week, I was just teaching about the outbreak of the Second World War, and there were so many parallels that come to mind. First of all, of course, before the war started, the fake negotiations and the fake dialogue that Putin had with Western leaders was reminiscent of 1938, the Munich Accords, where Hitler, of course, spoke about protecting the ethnic Germans in Sudetenland, and the West pressured Czechoslovakia to give Sudetenland, surrender Sudetenland to the Germans. But that did not, of course, fulfill Hitler's appetite. Next on the list, of course, was Poland. And in September 1939, of course, before that, we had the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, the Nazi-Soviet pact with dividing Eastern Europe into spheres of influence, which was really what Putin has been aiming at. The grand bargain that he hoped for with the US was that Ukraine would be clearly in Russia's sphere of influence. The US, fortunately, in the West didn't acquiesce in that. And then he moved to continuing with these World War II parallels. The attack on Poland on the 1st of September 1938 began with a false flag operation, a staged provocation by the Germans that the Poles had initiated this. And perhaps the best, and I'll stop, I could of course give a long history lecture, but I'll stop with this parallel. To me, the most immediate one is the Finnish Winter War, which began at the end of November 1939. It was in that case, the Soviets initiated it also with a false flag operation, claiming that the Finns had attacked them instead. And just like the invasion of Ukraine now, it has turned out to be a disaster because Moscow believed that it would be a cakewalk. And very much so, Stalin at the time and Putin now both seem to be victims of their own propaganda, that they're not getting the most accurate information about reality. In both cases, the Red Army's performance against Finland and their unpreparedness was such that they believe that if the army moves in, that the Finnish working class will welcome them as liberators from their own bourgeois dictatorship. Just like Putin is claiming that the Ukrainians will be wanting to get rid of the Nazi junta in Kiev, which of course Zelensky has been elected with 73%. There's hardly any Western leader in a democracy who's gotten that measure of support in free elections as Zelensky. And as in the case of the Finnish Winter War, Finland had had a civil war in 1918, and the nation was somewhat divided, but faced with a foreign invasion, the nation rallied and united against the foreign invader. So those are just my few opening remarks before turning to the Q&A with the minister. And since I'm the chair, I will ask the first question before opening it up to everyone else. And we have quite a bit of time. We have about 50 minutes.
Before we do that, Andres, sorry.